Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's video we got a couple of things to discuss, including a suspension in Calgary, a couple of injury updates, we have a new PTO in Carolina, and we also have a couple of trade rumors involving the Flames, the Oilers, the Jets, and the Carolina Hurricanes. And we'll go to all of that coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the Edmonton Hockey Channel. Before I start this video, don't forget to like this video, and if you'd like to remember to subscribe down below. We are so close to the subscriber. Thank you for all of your support. I would never be able to do this for all of you guys, so don't forget to subscribe. Now, as usual, I'm going to kick off this news video by discussing a couple of news pieces. There's been no signings or waiver placements as of yet over the past couple of days. Since Saturday, we've not had any signings or waiver news, so there's nothing really to talk about there. We have had one suspension in the NHL, and that is that Mangiapane was suspended 1 game, so it was a really bad play. In the Flames-Kraken game over on Sunday, Jared McCann wound up falling to the ice. Mangiapane gave him a cross-check down on the head. It was not a fantastic play. It seemed like it was going to be an automatic suspension, and he does get a 1-game suspension after being thrown from the game on that play. So I'm not overly surprised he got suspended. I thought it could have easily been even possibly more than that, at possibly 2 games. But Mangiapane is going to sit out the next game due to a suspension, and the Flames are not going to have one of their more lethal offensive weapons for tonight's game against the Nashville Predators. So it'll be interesting to see, but definitely that's a really bad blow for the Flames. It seemed like frustrations were boiling over until the Flames were able to come away with the win and improve their record and end their losing streak. So that was a huge win there for the Calgary Flames. But still, they lose Mangiapane in that game due to a game misconduct, and they wound up losing him for a game due to a suspension. So not overly surprised there that he did get suspended. I think it was definitely the right call, and Mangiapane is not going to be in the next game for the Calgary Flames. Then we also go over to a couple of PTO updates. The 2 players who were still left in Piszczek and Ritchie, Piszczek in Pittsburgh, Ritchie in Florida, they're still there on the PTOs, so we don't have any updates there on those 2 guys. We do have a new guy on a PTO, as the Carolina Hurricanes have brought in Jaroslav Halak on a PTO. Reason being, we'll get to this on the injury front, but Frederik Andersen's going to be out for a pretty significant period of time. So due to this, they still don't have a whole bunch of confidence in Raanta and Kochetkov. Neither one of those 2 guys have done overly fantastic this year. They're probably going to run with Raanta and Kochetkov for the time being, but if either of those 2 are not able to do overly well to start this run of time without Andersen, then I think there's a very likely chance that they will sign Halak and extend him to a new deal. So it'll be interesting to see, but that's really the only update we have on a PTO. So there's another new guy on a PTO in Halak. He joins Ritchie and Piszczek as the only 3 guys left on PTOs. So it'll be interesting to see if the Carolina Hurricanes wind up signing him to an NHL contract. I think it's possible, especially with Andersen out for pretty significant period of time. I think there was a very likely chance that Halak could at least be signed to be a solid 3rd stringer, or possibly even be like an NHL tandem goaltender for this Canes team. So it'll be interesting to see, but the Canes do have another PTO signed. Going over to that injury update, like we said, we have a lot of injuries to discuss here. First, Taylor Hall was cleared to play, got back in game action for the Chicago Blackhawks on Saturday, so really good news there for Chicago. Kaapo Kähkönen has an upper body injury. He's going to be out day-to-day right now for the San Jose Sharks. Ryan McDonagh has a lower body injury, out day-to-day for the Nashville Predators. Matthias Samuelsson has an undisclosed injury, out for an unknown period of time for Buffalo, while Cousins has an upper body injury, out day-to-day for Buffalo. Felix Sandstrom has an upper body injury, out for an unknown period of time for Philadelphia. Dylan Dubé has been cleared to play for the Calgary Flames, so that was good news for Calgary. Duchesne has an upper body injury, out for an unknown period of time for Dallas. Trevor Van Riemsdyk has a lower body injury, out for an unknown period of time for Washington. Alec Martinez missed Sunday's game for the Vegas Golden Knights due to an undisclosed injury. He's out for an unknown period of time. Meanwhile, Killorn and Gibson were cleared to play for Anaheim. Tyler Mott was cleared to play for Tampa, and Alex Vlasic was cleared to play for Chicago. They all got into the last game for those teams, so that's fantastic news for those guys. Well, Dylan Larkin has an upper body injury. It's going to be a game-time decision for tonight's game for the Detroit Red Wings. Frederick Olofsson has an upper body injury in his day-to-day for Colorado. Robbie Fabbri has been cleared to play for the Detroit. Adam Ruzicka has been cleared to play for Calgary. Bill Horvat has an undisclosed injury. He's out day-to-day for the New York Islanders. Brennan Biro has an upper body injury. He's out for an unknown period of time for the Buffalo Sabres. And then we have, like we said, Frederik Andersen has experienced some issues with blood clotting. He's going to be out for the next little while. It sounds like he'll make a full recovery, but he's going to be out for an extremely long period of time. So really bad news there for the Carolina Hurricanes. Hopefully he is able to overcome this serious injury, but hopefully it's not a really long period of time. They do expect him to make a full recovery, but it'll be interesting to see when Anderson will be able to get back, which is why they signed Halak to the PTO. And on top of that, we also got news that Nick Backstrom, who took a leave of absence to deal with his injury as he's not playing overly well over the past couple of games to start the season after his hip surgery from last year, it sounds like he will probably not return for the entirety of the season. So that's the way the Capitals are operating right now. Probably not going to return at any point this season, so it'll be interesting to see what happens with Backstrom. But it definitely sounds like Backstrom is not going to be returning anytime soon. It's a really bad blow there from the Capitals to lose one of their top-line centers, but definitely it's a big blow to them. And like I said before in one of my last videos discussing this, I think there's a very likely possibility Backstrom could be done his career. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. But that's the only injury updates we got to talk about here today. So let's go over to the news update part of the video. Trade rumors. Not much here, but we do have a couple of things to discuss. First, there's been a couple of reports I've seen recently saying that after the hat trick Niederriter had with the Winnipeg Jets against Arizona on Saturday, there's been a lot of talk that Niederriter may want to remain with Winnipeg instead of testing for agency. He was traded there by the Nashville Predators last year at the trade deadline when Nashville was selling off pieces. He fit pretty well in their middle six. He's had more of a elevated role playing on the third line, consistent with guys like Lowry and Appleton, and it seems like he's fitting in really well with Winnipeg. So we know the Jets already signed Scheifele and they signed Halak. There's a possibility, I think, that they could also sign Niederriter too. He's been really well with the middle six. He's a very good second, third line player. He can put up 20, 25 goals this season, put up 45, 50 points this season, be a really good depth scoring point contributor. So I would not be overly shocked if the Jets really did have some interest in Niederriter. He's a fantastic player. So if the Jets do want to re-sign him, I think that would be a fantastic move by the Jets. I'm not overly shocked if they want to keep him. Niederriter obviously seems like he would be open to staying with Winnipeg, so it'll be interesting to see, but it sounds like Niederriter would really like to stay with Winnipeg. In my opinion, a decent value deal would be for Niederriter, maybe like a 2, 3, 4-year deal at around like somewhere between $4 and $5 million AAV, I think would be a really good deal for Niederriter. So it'll be interesting to see if Niederriter winds up signing his extension with Winnipeg at some point, or if he does indeed test free agency, or maybe if he's traded at the deadline. But a really good news there for Winnipeg that Niederriter is at least open to signing an extension with the Winnipeg Jets, so that's really good news. There's been some talk from around the NHL that I've seen as well that Oliver Wahlstrom may be a trade chip towards the end of the season for the New York Islanders if he's not doing overly well. I think someone at thefourthperiod.com mentioned this, and they said that Oliver Wahlstrom has not been doing overly well this year. He's been healthy scratched on multiple occasions. He's been playing on the third line, on the fourth line. He's not being able to give in that huge opportunity to really show his offensive prowess that he showed early on in his career and in like the juniors and AHL. And he's not had an overly fantastic career at the NHL levels. Some people think that with him not getting a huge look with NYI, if he's not getting a huge opportunity and improving his game by sometime before the trade deadline, he might be a possible trade candidate. He's a very good, solid young player, in my opinion. Former first-round pick, who I think could definitely still be a very fantastic second-line forward, I think, who could put up probably 15 to 25 goals a season in the right system. But I just don't think that the Islanders are utilizing him to the best of his abilities. So yes, if he continues to struggle and continues to not fit in well with the New York Islanders, I do think there's a very likely possibility he winds up getting moved. And if the Islanders are hovering around the playoff spot at the trade deadline, want to improve their forward group, I could see him be a piece that possibly gets moved in like a trade package to improve their forward group. So it'll be interesting to see, but I'm not overly shocked that the Islanders would want to try and keep him, as he was a former first-round pick. He's a really big piece. I think it was taken the same year as Noah Dobson, so they want him to work, but it just seems like he's not fitting in overly well right now with New York Islanders, and if he can't fit in overly well, then I don't expect him to possibly wind up staying with the Islanders long term. So it'll be interesting to see, but if Wahlstrom has not fit in well by sometime between like the new year and the trade deadline, expect Wahlstrom to possibly be on the move for a fresh start, and the Islanders to try and use him to possibly improve that team as much as they can. On top of that, we have saw on Elliot Friedman Third Who Thoughts About podcast. He said that the Calgary Flames, and I've seen it from other reports too, that the Calgary Flames are currently shopping all three of their top end defensemen defensemen. That's Noah Hanifin, Nikita Zadorov, and Chris Tanev. The Flames had a horrible start to the season. They had a 6-game losing streak. We're down to 2-7-1 before that Saturday game win against the Seattle Kraken. So it was a really bad losing streak for the Flames. There's a lot of people who think that they're bringing in younger players like Zary, Pospisil to see what they have in their system, and they're sort of already calling it quits. I'm not exactly sure if they would call it quits this early in, but it definitely seems like the Calgary Flames really do think that they can't really win with this core and they may need a shakeup. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But it sounds like all three of the pending UFA defensemen in Zadorov, Hanifin, and Tanev are possibly all on the market. I know Hanifin already before from earlier on was on the market for a long period of time. We know Hanifin earlier on in the offseason really didn't want to stay in Calgary. He wanted to have a fresh start, leave Calgary, possibly go back to the U.S. It sounded like he really wanted to go back there, but then he had a change of heart. He was closing in on a contract extension just after the season started, but then he halted contract talks after the Flames starts, and now there's a lot of talk that he's a possible trade candidate again for the Flames. So I'm not exactly sure if the Flames really want to commit to him long term, especially after the fact that he was already possibly being shopped earlier on. I think a lot of teams would like a Noah Hanifin. He's a top pair left shot defenseman who can definitely put up some points. He can definitely work well on a team system. So I would think there would be a huge amount of teams who would be interested in acquiring Noah Hanifin. For Tanev and Zadorov, they're lower end on the scale. You're not going to get as good of a return as you could get for Hanifin, but they're still really good defensemen. Tanev's a really good second pair shutdown defenseman. He can definitely work really well with a more offensive defenseman. He showed that in Vancouver with Quinn Hughes. So definitely, there's a lot of teams who could use a top 4 right shot defenseman that I think would love a guy like Chris Tanev. Zadorov, he's more of a third pair player, but he's a younger player than Tanev, and he's a big body who can really provide a physical presence. He can put up some points here and there as well, so he's not like a huge point producer, but he's not one of the better point producers in the league. So definitely, these are some pretty good players, and it sounds like teams like Vancouver, maybe Edmonton, Toronto have interest in guys like these, and I would expect there to have a ton of more interest in elsewhere. Elliot Friedman even mentioned on his podcast that he thinks that if Brad Treliving could swing it, the GM of the Leafs would possibly ask for like Zadorov and possibly even Tanev from the Calgary Flames, his former club. So definitely, it's going to be interesting to see. I expect the Flames to definitely make some moves. I'm not exactly sure how early it is. We don't usually see too many moves by like November, December. But I think if this team is still really bad, we could see some moves maybe like early January, maybe late January, early February, somewhere around there, maybe just before the trade deadline. But still, Flames did not look overly good, and it seems like all three of their pending UFA defensemen in Zadorov, Hanifin, and Tanev are all on the block right now. And then lastly here, could the Edmonton Oilers be in for some huge changes? Now, Elliot Friedman mentioned this on his 32 Thoughts podcast as well. The Oilers don't look good right now. After a huge win against the Calgary Flames in Heritage Classic, that was supposed to be their stepping stone to get up, start winning a couple games, get back to their winning ways. First game after Heritage Classic, lose 4-3 to Dallas. Next game, lose 5-2 to Nashville. Next game, lose 6-2 to Vancouver. They're not doing overly well, both defending and goaltending. Elliot Friedman mentioned this. Their team is not getting the saves that they need, but they're also not a hugely great defensive team right now. And on top of that, he also said that there's been a lot of talk that Jay Woodcroft could be fired. I think there's a very valid possibility, but the whole thing is that if they fire Woodcroft, who's going to replace him? Woodcroft has had a very fantastic record with the Edmonton Oilers during his tenure in Edmonton. And you know, he's a very good coach. I think he's been very well with Edmonton. The question is, if they fire him, who's replacing him? Who's a better head coach? And even if they fire Woodcroft, would the new coach be a better replacement for him than Woodcroft is right now? So, Edmonton's not really done overly well over the past few seasons, even with other coaches. So I think this is more of a roster issue, and they need to address this soon, otherwise this is going to be another lost season. And Elliot Friedman said that they may be close to possibly making some sort of a drastic move to try and shake up this roster. Sort of like trying to move off Campbell would be my guess. Campbell makes $5 million. He's signed for this year plus 3 more seasons. He's not doing overly well. They would have to pay an expensive price to move on from Campbell. But I think if they were to move on from Campbell and bring in a new goaltender, they need to do it. Now, a team that comes to mind would be the Anaheim Ducks. Would the Ducks possibly take like a second-round pick and a higher-end level prospect from the Edmonton Oilers to take on Campbell? And another part of that could possibly work is that with those styles starting to take over the net in Anaheim, maybe the Oilers go after Gibson. Gibson is not overly bad player. They move Gibson to Edmonton for Campbell and a couple of really good young pieces. I think that could be a trade that both sides would like. Gibson's a really good goaltender. I think he'd fit in really well with Edmonton. Campbell could be more of a backup in Anaheim and sort of be a little bit away from the spotlight, which is the Edmonton Oilers. So I could see that sort of a trade work if the price is right for the Anaheim Ducks, because Gibson's a good goaltender, and Campbell is someone whose contract is not overly good. So the Oilers would have to pay Anaheim to take him on, but that could be an option. If they're just trying to jump off Campbell, I could see the Sharks be of interest. They're not doing overly well. Kaapo Kähkönen's in the final year of his deal. They could use a guy who's still in the net for the next couple of years. They already aren't doing overly well, so maybe that's a possibility. Maybe the Oilers trade him to Chicago. That's another possibility. Maybe they try and bring in Peter Mrazek. I'm not sure how much of an improvement that would be, but that would be another possibility, possibly seeing Campbell to go to Chicago. I think there would be a couple of other teams that would have the cap space to sort of make that sort of a trade, but I'm not exactly sure if in those trades they could move Campbell and get a goalie back in the same thing, which is why I think Anaheim sort of makes the most sense in my opinion if they were to move Campbell. But that's sort of the situation they are facing right now. I still think Skinner is better than his record showed this year, and I still think he's going to be a fantastic starter in the future. And I think if he can find his groove again, he should be able to back up the Oilers to some more wins, but he's still not doing overly well. The defense could definitely use some more improvements. They have a really good top pair of Bouchard and Ekholm. That's a really good top pair. But their second pair of Nurse and Ceci is not overly great, and their third pair of Kulak and whether it be Niemelainen or Broberg or whoever's on that third pair at that time is not overly great. Kulak's a really good third pair defenseman. I think he could fit in really well there. But ideally, Ceci's also a third pair defenseman, and ideally those two will be really good. They don't have a really legit top four defenseman to play with Darnell Nurse. So could they go out and acquire top four defensemen? Like I said, Elliot Friedman said that he thinks that the Edmonton Oilers could have interest in Chris Tanev. I think that would be a fantastic addition if they were able to get him. But would the Flames really want to trade with the Alberta rivals? Probably not. It would definitely be interesting to see what other names will be out there who could help the Edmonton Oilers. I wonder if a team like Columbus was overabundance of defensemen could possibly help them out with a guy like Peek or Boqvist. There's probably a couple of other teams out there who could use defensemen to Edmonton, but definitely, I think there's a very likely chance that the Oilers do not turn things around and things are not starting to look up for the Edmonton Oilers. This team is going to be in trouble fast. And I think there's a very likely chance that this team could see major retool in the not too distant future. But it's going to be interesting to see. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts down in the comments. Do the Edmonton Oilers make a huge change? Is Campbell possibly on the move? Do they need to upgrade their defense? Is there some way they can make these trades work so that they can get some of these big pieces so they can improve their defense? Could they go after Tanev? Could they go after Peek or Boqvist? Could they go after Gibson? Will they be able to deal Campbell to a team like the San Jose Sharks or the Chicago Blackhawks? Definitely. Love to hear your guys' thoughts on that. Do the Flames wind up dealing Tanev, Zadorov, and Hanifin? Is it all three pending UFAs they wind up dealing? And if so, what sort of a timeline do you think they'll be dealt by? And who do you think the teams will be acquiring them? Definitely love to hear your guys' thoughts on that. I'd also love to hear your guys' thoughts on, does Wahlstrom get moved by the Islanders? I think if he doesn't start to produce overly well for the Islanders, I think that's a very likely possibility. Where do you think would be a good fit for Wahlstrom if he was to be moved? Do you see the Winnipeg Jets re-sign Niederriter? I think it's a very likely possibility. He's been a really good fit there ever since coming over there last year's trade line, so I think he'll be a really good fit there. So it'll be interesting to see if he is able to get a new contract extension at some point over the year or into the offseason. And also, what else do you think about the other things we discussed in today's video? Mangiapane suspension, PTO update for Halak, some of the injury updates. Definitely. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts down in the comments. But that's what I'm going to talk about for today. So don't forget to like this video. And if you're related, remember to subscribe down below. We are so close to 100 subscribers. Thank you for all of your support. I would never be able to all of you guys. So don't forget to subscribe. I also do a blog talking about news, rumors, analysis, stuff like that. So definitely check that out. I'll leave a link to that in the description below. And I can't wait to see you guys all for the next video. See you guys soon.